Stop pretending to be sick. Don't get in my way. You're just a useless housewife. I was feeling really unwell, but my husband pushed me aside and stormed out of the house. Husbands and wives are supposed to support each other, through good times and bad, but he left me behind. The word despair kept repeating in my head as I slowly passed out. Then, someone unexpected came to help me. My name is Wendy, and I'm 32 years old. I married my husband, Sam, who's the same age, about a year ago. I had a regular life as a working wife. Sam and I met at work, and he was okay with me continuing my job after marriage. We divided the house chores, though he wasn't very good at them, so I gave him only easy tasks to handle. He was willing to help, and at first, I had no complaints about our life together. One day, I started feeling a bit unwell and went to the doctor. "Congratulations, you're 7 weeks pregnant." I was shocked, but happy. That evening, Sam and I shared the news. "I'm going to be a dad? This doesn't feel real," he said, surprised. "It takes time to sink in, but the baby will grow, little by little," I replied, full of hope for the future. For a while, we were thrilled, but things soon took a difficult turn. "Hey, where's dinner? You were supposed to cook today, and the bathtub is still dirty." "I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well and couldn't do anything," I said, trying to apologize. I was in my first trimester and had terrible morning sickness. I felt nauseous all day and couldn't even stand properly. I spent most of my time in bed and had to take sick days from work. I could barely function, but Sam didn't seem to understand. He started getting angry at me. "Don't think you can slack off just because you're pregnant. You expect me to work and do all the housework? How will you be a good mom if you're already this useless?" His words hurt me deeply. I kept asking myself how he could treat me like this, but I also wondered if he saw me as a burden since I couldn't help him as much as before. I thought about going to my parents' house until I felt better, but I didn't want to create distance between us. I kept telling myself that the morning sickness was temporary and would pass in a couple of months. But instead of getting better, Sam's attitude only got worse. After a while, my morning sickness eased, but I started having other health problems. I had to go in and out of the hospital and eventually decided to take a leave from work. I didn't want to risk pushing myself too hard and harming the baby. I spoke with my doctor and my workplace, and we decided this was the best choice for now. Sam didn't seem to care. "Stop relying on me so much. If you can't work, that's your problem," he said coldly. I knew I wasn't working, but my decision was for the baby's safety. Why did he have to blame me for everything? I tried to endure his harsh words. "Sam, I get a small allowance during my leave. Can you help with living expenses by covering a little more from your salary?" I asked. "What? Why should I pay for your part too?" he snapped. His lack of support made me wonder if staying married to him was the right choice. My worries grew bigger and bigger, like a balloon ready to burst. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought everything would be wonderful, but it wasn't. It was the opposite. Then came the final blow, my mother-in-law. "How are you doing, Wendy?" she asked one day. Sam's mom had raised him on her own after divorcing his father. She was a smart and kind woman who had always treated me nicely. "You should move around a bit more while pregnant," she said. "It's tough for Sam to handle work and house chores at the same time. You need to take care of those things." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't a bad person, and I understood her perspective. She'd had children herself and probably thought I should be able to manage, but at that moment, it felt like she was telling me to stop complaining and handle all the housework, even though I was sick and taking time off work. "Yes, you're right," I said weakly. I wanted to talk to her about Sam, but her words made me feel more alone than ever. She didn't seem to understand how I felt. "Let me know if you need help," she said before hanging up. But her offer didn't bring me any comfort. Then one day, things went from bad to worse. That morning, I had a fever and felt so tired I couldn't move much. I also kept feeling nauseous. Somehow, I managed to make Sam's breakfast, but afterward, I collapsed on the sofa. "Stop acting like you're so sick," he muttered as he left for work, glaring at me. I crawled into bed, hoping to feel better, but my condition didn't improve. I was too weak to cook dinner. I thought about ordering food, but money was tight. The allowance Sam gave me wasn't enough, and I had to dip into our savings every month. Plus, the medical bills for the baby's delivery weren't going to be cheap. At this rate, we'd run out of money before the baby even arrived. Feeling desperate, I called Sam. "I'm really sick today. I said. I can't make dinner, can you bring something home? What? Are you kidding me? You're a housewife, that's your job. But I can't even get up. What do you want me to do? Figure it out, I'm busy, don't expect me to do your work. He hung up, leaving me in tears. Later that night, the front door slammed shut. Sam was home. Hey, honey, dinner is. Doesn't matter, I'm going out for a drink, he interrupted. By then, my whole body was burning with fever, and I could barely stand. Sam, I'm really sick, please stay home with me tonight, I begged. But instead of helping, he shoved me aside and yelled, "Shut up, stop pretending to be sick, you useless housewife." And with that, he stormed out. I collapsed in the doorway, too weak to get back to bed. Somebody, please help me, I thought desperately, but no one came. I was completely alone. Then, in my fading consciousness, I heard a voice from far away. "Stay with me," it said. "Who is this?" I murmured weakly before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. Anne, my mother-in-law, was by my side, looking worried. "Wendy, thank God you're awake," she said, relieved. "I called an ambulance when I found you collapsed at the door." Tears filled her eyes as she told me how she had come over, and I was overwhelmed with gratitude. "You're safe now, and so is your baby, I'll get the doctor," she said before quickly leaving the room. The doctor later explained that I had severe anemia and the flu. If Anne hadn't found me, the baby could have been in danger. My fever had been 104 degrees when I arrived at the hospital. "But Anne, why were you at my house?" I asked. She hesitated. "Sam called me, he said you were being lazy and needed someone to discipline you. I decided to come over and see what was really going on. That's when I found you unconscious." Her voice softened. "I'm sorry, Wendy, I believed what Sam said at first and planned to scold you. I should have listened to you instead." And then handed me a cardigan and smiled. "This is another reason I came," she said. "You always remember my birthday and send me thoughtful gifts. You sent me this cardigan last week, and I wanted to thank you in person." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I was worried you were really doing nothing at home, as Sam claimed, but after seeing what happened, I understand the truth now. You've always cared so much about others." Tears filled both our eyes as she held my hand tightly. "It's okay," I whispered, comforted by her support. And suddenly became furious. "Sam's my son, but what he did to you is unforgivable. How dare he treat the mother of his child like this?" Her anger gave me strength. When she asked what I planned to do, I told her, and she nodded firmly. "I'm on your side, Wendy, whatever you decide, I'll support you," she said. With her encouragement, I finally made up my mind. After a week in the hospital, Anne came with me to my house. I hadn't heard from Sam at all during my stay, but it didn't matter anymore. When we opened the door, we were hit by a disgusting smell. "What is that stench?" I asked, covering my nose. "It smells like a wild animal's been living here," Anne said, making me almost laugh despite the situation. We found Sam sprawled on the sofa, snoring and drooling. The living room was a disaster zone. "Wake up, you idiot," Anne yelled. Sam jumped awake, startled. "What, Mom? Wendy, you've been gone for days, what have you even been doing?" he complained. And didn't hold back. "What have you been doing, Sam? This house looks worse than a zoo, how could you live like this?" She wasn't exaggerating, the place was disgusting. Empty beer cans and food scraps filled the sink. Damp towels and dirty clothes were scattered everywhere. The floors were sticky, and the smell was unbearable. "It's worse than a zoo, even animals are cleaner," Anne said, glaring at Sam. Sam glared back at me. "Don't act like you're better than me, you're the one who..." But Anne cut him off. "You couldn't even take care of yourself for 1 week. This is embarrassing." I looked around and calmly added, "I never realized you were this incapable of living on your own." It was true, I had always done the cleaning, laundry, and cooking before I got sick. The house had never been perfect, but it was never this bad. Now, I finally saw the truth. Sam wasn't just inconsiderate, he was completely useless. "Why did you leave Wendy behind that night?" Anne demanded, her voice sharp with anger. She couldn't believe what he had done. Sam looked like a scolded child, trying to defend himself. "She was faking it," he muttered. Anne's eyes widened in disbelief. "Faking it?" She was pale, burning up with a fever, and barely conscious. "Do you even have a brain?" she snapped. And was usually calm and collected, But this was the first time I had ever heard her raise her voice like this. Sam didn't respond, he just glared at me, his eyes saying, "How dare you turn my mom against me?" Then he muttered in a low, resentful tone, "Don't get carried away. I've been the one supporting you all this time." In the past, his anger would have made me timid and unsure of myself, but not anymore. "Well, fine," I said firmly, "you don't have to support me anymore. I'm ready to stand on my own." "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, confused. "It means I don't need you. Who would want to stay married to a grown man who acts like a helpless child and can't even clean up after himself?" I had put up with his attitude for too long, but this time, it was different. He had gone out drinking while I was seriously ill, trashed the house, and showed he couldn't take responsibility as a husband or father. I glared at him and asked, "By the way, you said you were out drinking with friends, but were you really? What were you actually doing?" His eyes flickered nervously. "That's none of your business," he mumbled. "Oh, it is her business," and said sharply, "She's your wife and has every right to know. Now, tell us the truth." Sam fidgeted under her intense gaze. "Well," he hesitated, but when he saw we weren't backing down, he finally admitted, "I'm sorry." As it turned out, Sam had been having an affair with a coworker ever since I became pregnant. It was such a cliché, I almost laughed. "What's her name? What department does she work in? How often were you seeing her?" And I grilled him, taking turns. While he stammered through his answers, I stopped the recording on my phone. "Got it, we've got your confession on tape," I said with a smirk. Sam's face darkened. "You tricked me," he shouted. "Yep, so what?" I replied, honestly, "you saved me the trouble of hiring a private investigator. Thanks for being so cooperative." His expression turned into a mix of frustration and defeat. "You fooled me," he muttered bitterly. I couldn't help but shake my head. "The logic you have is unbelievable," I thought. "You were out cheating while pretending to be the victim, but sure, blame me for your mess." When I saw Sam stubbornly refusing to admit his faults, a wave of misery washed over me. I sighed deeply and muttered, "You're selfish, arrogant, and a liar, just like your father." "No, not my dad." The remark hit him like a slap in the face. His reaction was understandable. He despised his father, a man who, according to Anne, was mean, often drunk, and violent. Sam's parents divorced when he was in middle school, and he had spent years distancing himself from his father's shadow. Hearing that he resembled the man he hated was unbearable. "I don't drink or act like him," he protested. And interjected, her tone sharp, "That's not the point she's making." She looked him squarely in the eye. "Do you know how many times your father left me sick and pregnant, going out drinking while I suffered alone? Sons do become like their fathers after all. If I'd known, I would have divorced him before you could even remember." Her voice carried both disgust and sadness. Sam froze, his defiance dissolving into shock. "I won't let my grandchild have a father who's a bad influence," and continued, "Don't you agree, Wendy?" "Absolutely," I replied. "We don't need him, or rather, we're better off without him." Sam's face turned pale. The weight of Anne's words seemed to crush him. "Wait," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "We're going to have a baby. Can't we calm down and talk this out?" He stepped closer, his tone coaxing, like a child begging for forgiveness. "What are you talking about?" I said, shaking my head. "We're way past that point." "What am I supposed to do, then?" he cried, covering his face with his hands. His fingers parted just enough for me to see his eyes, furtively watching my reaction. Even now, he clung to a shred of hope. That's when Anne delivered the final blow. "Enough, if you persist any longer, I'll disown you, do you hear me?" "Mom, what the hell, why won't you stand by me?" he stammered, his voice breaking. Anne's glare silenced him, his resistance crumbled, and for the first time, he looked utterly defeated. Some say a woman's enemy is another woman, but in this moment, and proved that a woman's greatest ally is also a woman, she stood by me until the end. I filed for divorce in the 7th month of my pregnancy. It was ironic, having a child had destroyed our marriage, but perhaps it was also a blessing in disguise. Afterward, I returned to my parents' home, where I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My parents were initially shocked when I arrived, heavily pregnant and emotionally drained, but they quickly rallied around me. My father introduced me to a lawyer, who helped secure alimony that accounted for both the emotional and financial toll Sam had inflicted on me. I also confronted the woman Sam had cheated with, delivering a speech that left her speechless and me deeply satisfied. Once the divorce was finalized, Sam began visiting, asking to see his son. I still haven't received child support, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You don't need that, we're a family, and the best thing for us is to be together, he argued, his logic as incoherent as ever. I scoffed, you failed as a husband. The least you can do is fulfill your duty as a father. If you don't, you'll be good for nothing, just like your father. His face twisted with a bitter laugh, the weight of my words hitting him like a sledgehammer. He seemed haunted by the memory of his own father, a lonely, failed man who had left a lasting scar. Sam's silence was answer enough. Rumor had it that Sam had resigned from his job. He'd gone to his colleagues, complaining about our divorce and insisting that it wasn't his fault. But his attempts to justify himself only backfired. He genuinely believed he hadn't done anything wrong. He openly shared the details of how he treated me, and it disgusted everyone who heard. The rumors of his affair with a colleague spread like wildfire, and no one felt sorry for him. He was quickly labeled as a scumbag, and his once friendly colleagues began avoiding him. He became isolated, too uncomfortable to continue working there. Sam was the epitome of a delusional man. I feared he might still hold on to the illusion that we could reconcile, but that idea was as far from my mind as it could be. Wendy, I heard you're going back to work soon. How are you feeling? Much better now. I have to work for my son. That's right, you're a strong mother, she said, a smile of encouragement on her face. I hadn't told Sam about my plans, but sometimes, I would take my son to visit and. You're not my family anymore, now that we're divorced, she said one day, though her words no longer carried sadness. But don't worry, Wendy, I'll always be here for you, and for him, too. And had saved both of our lives. Now, she proudly held her grandson in her arms. As a fellow single mother, I'll need your guidance, I said, joking. Of course, and replied with a wink, from now on, we're not just friends, we're sisters in arms, or fellow detectives who've driven a villain to confession. Our bond had evolved, we were more like best friends now, and it felt right. But sometimes, a doubt lingered. You're just like your father. Those words haunted me. Would my son grow up to be like Sam? Would there come a time when I'd find myself thinking, like father, like son? There's no point in worrying about the future, I realized. I would teach him right from wrong. I'd show him the importance of kindness and compassion. My son would be my son, no matter what, nothing more, nothing less. As a mother, I would risk everything to raise him right. The sunlight poured through the cold winter sky, warming my face. It felt like a sign, like the world was cheering me on.